In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for this opportunity to gather together as a community, to open ourselves to your Spirit, to share together our hopes and our concerns, and to both receive answers, but most especially to grow together as your body. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. I do want to make a quick disclaimer to anybody who's listening on the recorder. We're trying out a new recording device because last time my phone failed midway through and we lost about 30 minutes. So now I'm recording with my phone and another device, which I've never used before. So God only knows how this is going to sound. So all of you here are lucky because you get to hear it firsthand, or maybe not lucky depending on your point of view. But hopefully say a prayer that these machines work the way they are supposed to. So if you haven't been to one of these before, this is now our fourth town hall meeting. We're doing these every fourth Friday of the month from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. My plan has been, and will continue to be, to do it a rotation among the parishes so that people can come no matter what parish they attend, and if you're near multiple parishes, you can come multiple times. The basic format of the evening is that I'm going to spend probably 10 to 15 minutes. I usually edge towards about 10 unless I get excited about something, and then I edge much further on updates, how things are going, developments since our last town hall meeting. And then we're going to pause for about 5 minutes so you can talk amongst yourselves, not because I want to prevent you from asking questions, but so that you can talk to people around you about what question you're going to ask so that you guys don't duplicate questions. So then we can use the remaining hour and 15 minutes to ask pretty much any question you want. If I know the answer, I'll tell you. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you. And then I'll go look it up afterwards and find a way to get it to you there. So that's basically the format of the evening. I'm willing to stick around a little bit afterwards as well, but we're going to do our best to end around 8 o'clock just because, I got a bedtime. So that's sort of the format of the evening, and we will go from there. So updates since the last town hall meeting. I have less updates than I would normally because, as some of you are aware, I was away on retreat and vacation, and it was great. And as I told someone else at the other table, I did my best not to think of any of you at all while I was away. Didn't succeed as much as you might think, but really tried to not get involved in work. So really tried to stay away from that. I was away on retreat, and then every year priests are required to go on retreat. Woe is us, it's so hard. So I spent 5 days at retreat at Mundelein Seminary, where I studied the majority of my priestly studies. And then afterwards, there was a 15-year anniversary reunion for me and my classmates. About 20, 25 guys showed up, and we spent most of this week together hanging out and just having a good time. So it was a wonderful time away. I did think of you. When I'm away on vacation, I offer a mass for our parishes, for our school, and for our employees. So I offered several different masses for intentions of our community because, even when you're away, we want to be praying for each other. Before that, between then and the last parish town hall, things have been continuing forward. So you all know that we implemented some liturgical changes, particularly here at St. Joseph's and at Queen of Angel parishes. So a lot of it is visible stuff, in as much as you'll have noticed that our lectors and extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion are now coming up in ministry from the pews rather than processing in the procession. They're wearing normal clothing rather than albs. We reduced the number of extraordinary ministers to a minimal level, and we rejiggered a bit about how communion is being distributed. Now, I'm going to spend a little bit of time explaining that, but while I was on vacation, while I was on retreat, so I guess I did think of you a little more than I actually advertised, I wrote a really long blog post at fathermaurer.com. I did lots and lots of research. I did citations from the General Instruction of the Roman Missal, from the Archbishop, from the Pope, from the National Directory on Extraordinary Ministers. I think I did a lot of stuff. I would really love for you to read it if you want to get a deep dive into it. So fathermaurer.com. You should definitely bookmark that and read it on a regular basis. But all of these changes really boil down to a couple of principles. The first one being that at communion, so all the changes around communion is meant to be a time, A, of the obvious, of communion, and B, A, receiving communion, and B, of the clergy, particularly your priest, distributing communion, that you receive communion from your priest. And this is in no way to diminish or denigrate our many extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion, because we have lots of folks who help out at Mass and who go to the homebound in ways that I simply cannot do. I can't be everywhere at once. I can't go all the places that need to be gone. And even at Mass, I can't stand in the middle and distribute the precious body and bilocate and distribute the precious blood. And so having that help is a huge help. It really is. But the Church also teaches us that the primary person to be distributing communion is the priest. And for many people, it's the only time that I get to be able to connect with them, and so be able to have that opportunity. So both here and at Queen of Angels, we were able to reduce the number of extraordinary ministers to two precious blood, and only the priest who's distributing the precious body, and then one other extraordinary minister who goes to the choir, and then on the way back stops in the back row for those who can't come front. So we moved the handicap seating by and large to the front, but there are always going to be some folks who need to sit at the back for various reasons, and so to be able to provide for them if they can't come up front, and the priest is going to give to the handicap at the front and then distribute. As I understand it, because it's been a few weeks now and I've been gone for most of them, as I understand it, we're still trying to learn sort of the alternating back and forth. It's just the priest up front, you have two lines. We're still working on that, so Mass is a little longer, but not terribly much longer. I heard, especially this last weekend that we did it, that we're just getting into the hang of things a little better, but the primary purpose really is so that the priest can fulfill his function of distributing communion, and the people can receive from their priest. And again, just that opportunity to be able to distribute communion. The other piece of the change with communion is about blessings at communion, and this is something that I think might be better dove into on the blog post. There's lots of details, but the long and short of it is that communion time isn't really the time for blessings. That a blessing is properly offered as there's a Roman dicastery, the dicastery of divine worship and something or the other. It's a long name in Rome. But they got this question about this, and one of their first responses was, the blessing at Mass, the blessing for people is properly at the end of Mass. And blessings at communion, we don't quite know how they kind of sprung forth, but there is a theory that back in, I want to say the early 2000s, maybe the late 90s, Pope John Paul II, a woman came up to receive communion, and her little boy came up with, he gave communion to the woman, and then turned to the little boy and blessed the little boy. And everyone thought, that's really cool, we want to do that too. And it took off like wildfire. But there's one problem. The Pope is allowed to make special exceptions like that. The rest of us, not so much. And the Church has never given that permission to bishops and priests. And in fact, we're not allowed under our own authority to add or subtract anything to the Mass. And so part of that is, if the Pope were to change that tomorrow, we would change that tomorrow. But really, as the DDF, the doctrine of, anyway, the office in Rome, sorry, I'm blanking on the name, had said, blessings are really at the end of Mass, and communion time is for communion. So those are the big changes at communion. We also changed some things with lectors, mostly that they're coming up from the pew instead of processing in. They're not sitting in the sanctuary because they're not technically ministers of the whole Mass. So usually if you're sitting in the sanctuary, you're ministering for the whole Mass, and they are dressing in civies rather than albs. Similarly, because when you're wearing the alb, you usually minister for the whole Mass and not just for a portion. So those are the liturgical changes that we made starting in October. We made them at St. Joseph's and Queen of Angels solely because we were more ready, where on the east, which is Port Townsend, and on the west, St. Anne's and St. Thomas, we weren't ready to implement those as quickly or as fast. And Father Ed had been away throughout September, and Father Gali is getting used to this new community as well. And so we decided, they decided that they weren't ready to move that quickly, and I had the opportunity to sit down with the various liturgical leaders in the several weeks before October. So we were more ready than they are, and Father Ed and Father Gali are considering and discerning how they move forward with that. We've also begun our faith formation programs, so RCIA is in full swing, youth group, First Communion, a bunch of different programs are happening there. So we've got a few things going on there. We also happen to have the installation of the pastor, which was lots of fun, and I never thought that I could be as nervous saying something that I've already said 2 or 3 times, and yet, wouldn't you know it, standing up there reciting the Oath of Fidelity, which, again, I've already said it 3 times before, but here we are again. But it was lots of fun, and if you helped organize that, thank you very much for your part in doing different ministries, and our staff, and our deacons, and Father Ed and Father Gali especially. So it was a lot of fun. There was far too much lumpia. It was very, very good, but I still have some frozen lumpia. I say far too much lumpia. Let's be real. No such thing is possible. But I still have frozen lumpia in my in my freezer. So that'll come out sometime later on when I'm feeling ambitious. We also are getting ready for All Saints and All Souls Day, the next big celebrations that are coming up. And I don't know how many of you perhaps are looking forward into December, but of course we have been as well. And so we've been meeting with our liturgical leaders, our choir directors, our lector coordinators, and extraordinary minister coordinators and ushers, just looking down the road towards the coming Advent and Christmas season. I don't think a lot is changing. Can someone just tell me, do you guys normally do Mass at midnight, or is it a 10 o'clock midnight Mass? 10 o'clock. So that is a change we're making. So we're going to have the midnight Mass at midnight this year, because Father really likes the midnight Mass at midnight. So that is one, hopefully not too shocking change. I think the rest of our Mass schedule, I'm not promising, but I'm pretty sure the rest of our Mass schedule is the normal as it has been in previous years. One thing that came out of Rome while I was on vacation is that you guys know that December 8th is the Solemnity of the Immaculate Conception. And in years past, we have understood that if it lands on a Sunday or a Saturday and it gets moved, that it's not a holy day of obligation. However, some bishops wrote to Rome and said, hey, we want to confirm that this is not a holy day of obligation. And Rome said, no, that's not correct. It is a holy day of obligation. So we didn't plan for that. We'll be scrambling a little bit for that. It's still a month or so away, so we've got some time, but December 8th is coming up. And we're also still in process of working on December 12th, which is Our Lady of Guadalupe, which of course is a big day, especially for our Spanish-speaking community. So it's kind of the things that are going around. With me back from retreat and vacation, and Father Ed, who was away in September, we priests are finally, more or less stable for a little while. So we are looking down the road now, not only liturgically, but also towards the coming year, 2025. And the next big discernment that we're making, and you're going to hear more about it in the coming weeks, is about the Mass schedule, particularly the Vigil Masses and the Sunday Masses here at Queen of Angels and St. Joseph's. And this is admittedly a big discernment and a big decision. The deadline is that we need to make a decision. I need to make a decision by the end of, middle of November, so I can spend all of December announcing. And what the decision is to move down to 1 Vigil Mass and 3 Sunday Masses. And the purpose being, we need to restore Vigil Mass at Port Townsend, both to offer them the opportunity to have a Vigil Mass in their region for those who need to come on Saturday evening, as well as to offer a Saturday evening confession. They don't have Saturday evening confessions at all, only Saturday morning. And also to allow for the priests who are regional. Remember that Father Golly is on the Port Townsend east side, me, Father Maurer, I'm in the central side with Queen of Angels, St. Joseph's, and Father Ed is in the west side with St. Anne and St. Thomas. And currently, with the schedule as it is, Father Golly is bouncing between the Vigil Mass at St. Joseph's and the Sunday Masses at St. Mary Star of the Sea in Port Townsend. And so we want to allow for the priests to not have to be bouncing between their regions, and perhaps more importantly, to allow the priest of the region, which is me, to see all of my community every single weekend. Just like communion, we're changing some of that so I can have a connection with the people at communion. We also want to change the Mass schedule specifically so that the priest of the region has a connection with the people of his region. And right now, with 4 Masses between St. Joseph's and Queen of Angels, I am missing a quarter of the community every single weekend except once a month when I go to Port Townsend, which currently has the Vigil Mass at St. Joseph's. So what we're currently looking at is having a Vigil Mass, probably going to stay at 5 o'clock. I'm not really keen on changing that around. And then 3 Sunday Masses. And there's been, the pastoral councils have been debating furiously while I've been away, sending emails back and forth. And the current wisdom is that the 5 o'clock Mass really needs to be focused on the most attended Mass and the demographic that most needs that Mass because of different driving issues or whatnot, or health issues. And then apparently, and I would not have guessed this, so maybe you won't be surprised, the 8:30 Mass is sort of the Cadillac of Sunday Masses, because folks are like, we want to come to Mass. I hesitate to say come to Mass and get it over with, but come to Mass at the beginning of the day and not wait for the rest of the day. So the Vigil Mass and the 8:30 Mass seem to be sort of the first-class seats, if you will. So we're really discerning, trying to find a way, if you will, to square this circle so that no one parish, St. Joseph or Queen of Angel, gets weighted with all of the, if you will, desirable Masses, and the other parish gets weighted with the less desirable Masses. The schedule we're looking at, just to be very transparent, is a 5 o'clock Vigil, an 8:30 in the morning Mass, and then depending on where the 8:30 Mass is, a middle Mass, it's either at 10:30 or at 11 o'clock, depending on the location, and then a 1 o'clock Mass. And the reason this is necessary is to allow for time before and after Mass, for the priest to greet people, and then also the drive time in one of those Masses to drive between the parishes. So we're not, you're welcome to ask, of course, but I wanted you to be very transparent. We're not at a decision point yet. In fact, I'll be asking the councils to send me a summary of their discussion so far. But we're not far from it either. So I'm hopeful that probably in the next 2 weeks or so, when we schedule our meeting, that I'll be able to sit down with them, hear the final deliberations, and then come to a decision to share about that. at the end of November or mid-November, and then talk through what that looks like all through December so that in January we can launch it. The other change that we're looking at is to create a Tuesday Mass here at St. Joseph and have Father Galli come out on Tuesdays, not only to offer Mass, but also to help me, because we have lots of nursing homes and assisted living and various facilities here, and a lot of folks who are looking to have a priest come to offer the sacraments that only priests can offer, namely confession and anointing of the sick. And I asked Father Galli if he would be willing, since I go out there on Mondays to work with the staff, if he'd be willing to come out here on Tuesdays, not only to offer Mass, but also to help me, because I can't do all that visitation between my bouncing around. And Father Galli was very generous and saying, oh yeah, he'd be happy to do that. So some changes coming up in January, some things going on there. I think I've run out of steam on the various things that I have there. So before you raise your hands, what I'd like to propose next is at 6:46, I'd like to propose that we spend about 5 minutes at your tables, or you can just turn around and deal with you. Tell each other what questions you're going to ask, so that if two of you have the same question, one of you can think of a different question, okay? So we're going to spend just 5 minutes. I'm not looking to delay you real long, but I just would like you to collaborate a little bit so that we can answer as many questions as possible in that time, and then we'll reconvene in 5 minutes and go from there. It sound decent? All right, off we go. All right, so we're going to come back together. I feel like from the tone of the conversation, you guys have moved from planning to just fraternity, which is great. I'd like you to be in a good mood before you throw all the questions at me, but here we are. All right, so I don't have a gavel to call us to order, but I do want to talk a little bit about just sort of the general sort of, if you will, ground rules of this. So I'm going to ask you to raise your hands. What I'm going to try to do is point at one person and say you, and then let whoever's on deck know whoever's on deck, just so we have a clear order. Don't. If I don't call on you right away, please keep persisting, because I want to answer as many questions as possible. Because we're recording, I'm going to listen to your question, and then I'm going to repeat it so that it's amplified, so that it definitely comes up on the recording. I'll answer the question, and the person who asks the question gets the first right of follow-up. So I want to make sure I actually answer the question you asked. There have been a couple of occasions someone's answered a question, and I went off on a tangent, and it was lots of fun. And they're like, yeah, that's great, but what about the thing I talked about? So, and then we'll do follow-ups, and then we'll go to there. I would like to ask, just in your kindness, at some point we want to move on between questions. So if it gets to a point where it looks like, okay, we're belaboring a point, or we're lost in this one question, I'll draw it to a close, basically. So I want to make sure that we don't have one thing dominate the whole night, and try to allow for a diversity of questions and topics to come up. So hopefully that sounds fair and reasonable. And now feel free to raise your hands. Way in the back, way to go, yeah.
There's been a practice that was introduced in our parish. I'm particularly registered at Queen of Angels.
Yeah.
A few pastors back, when we're invited to stand at the fratres.
Yes.
But that particular pastor had us all remain seated. So it introduced a very strange situation where we've gotten good at it because we remain seated, but that is not what is envisioned in the GIRM. It says at that fratres that pray brethren we are to stand. And that uniformity of posture is very important.
Yeah.
And so you notice that when you go to other parishes, they
Sure.
come in the summertime and some pop up and then they sit down, because that is just the way it has been at every other parish I've been at.
Yep.
So with your attention to the
Liturgical things? Absolutely, I'm ready to answer that question.
I would love it if you could fix that.
Well, okay, let me repeat your question. I'm gonna correct me if I get it wrong. So just to sort of rephrase it, Father, what is the proper time to stand up at the Orate fratres, pray brethren that my sacrifice and yours, and the rest of the words that I'm forgetting right now? What are we supposed to do? Because it does vary from parish to parish, and how is it done? So I will tell you how I was taught. So you are absolutely right, and I love the fact, by the way, that you know what the general instruction of the Roman Missal is. Incidentally, it is I want to be very, very clear that when we make changes or make decisions at the parish, there are four principles, or a hierarchy of decision making. The highest value is our principles. What do we believe? What are we taught by the church? So we always follow our principles first. And the principles might even be articulated by things like liturgical documents, by the teachings of the church or whatnot. Our principles are our highest decision. So if the principles answer that question, boom, that's what we do. The next level is our policies, and these generally refer to archdiocesan policy and parish policy. And these in our archdiocese, the archbishop has mandated, and he's allowed to do this, that archdiocesan policies have the force of law. So unless one of the universal laws contradicts the policy, we also have to follow archdiocesan policy. And we have parish policies as well. These often are much more of a lower level, like, for instance, there is no glitter allowed in any decorations at Mass. Go ahead, ask me why. I dare you. So, local policy. The next level down is practicality, because sometimes, even though it might be a universal law, it doesn't make sense to do something because the altar is shaped a different way, or because the church is configured a different way. So we're not breaking the law, but we have to work around the space that we've got or the circumstances we have. And the very last level of decision-making is preferences. And whether it's the preference of the priest or of the community or of the minister, there is room for preferences in the way that we do things, but it is the lowest level. And the reason I lay all these out is because I very much loathe, I dislike when we do something because I like it that way. Because that's a really easy way to just be shifting with the winds at every moment. So there may be times when it's legitimate to say, I like it this way, and I'm given that option. The church does actually give, like what Eucharistic prayer gets chosen. The church has some guidance, but by and large, I'm free to do whichever Eucharistic prayer I discern and decide. But generally speaking, we really want to follow our principles, the teachings, and our policies, and then practicalities and preferences. And the reason I highlight all this, forgive me, I do remember your question, is that we really want to be observing what the church teaches in its liturgical teaching, because it has a reason for doing it. So, Orate, fratres, pray, brethren, that my sacrifice and yours may be acceptable. I forget, dang it, I had it, I almost had all of it, and it went away. What are we supposed to do? So my understanding is what you said, that the general instruction says that the people, in response to the priest, stand in response to what he says, and then say, may the sacrifice at your hands, the rest. I swear, guys, I know the Mass, I really do, but the response there. Here's what I was taught at seminary. I was taught it, my memory's even this bad before vacation, I heard that comment. So, what I was taught in seminary is that it's meant to be a call and response, and the idea that I was taught, and there is some level of interpretation that's valid, so I don't think that it's an agenda or a preference, but there is a line of thinking that I was taught, and I suspect the priest, that I don't know which priest, I don't even know, but the priest that you're referencing might have been taught similarly, that the priest offers the Pray Brethren prayer, speaking as the pastor to his people, and then everybody, after he finishes speaking, stands, and then as one body responds with one voice. And so they have that common posture that you're mentioning. I don't know, and to be honest, I'd have to look at the general instruction to Roman Missal. It looks like you have it there. That's okay. I don't mean to say that we need to do that right now. I don't know that the general instruction of the Roman Missal says whether you stand as he's saying it or after he's saying it. I suspect it says something to the effect of, you're going to tell me what it says, doesn't it? Say it.
What it says is, and from the invitation, Orate fratres is when you're supposed to stand.
Well, and see, I think, unfortunately, unless we don't, one of the things that you can do, it's a little bit of a cheat code, it doesn't often reveal a whole lot. I'd be curious to know what the original Latin says, because that is the most authoritative, but my guess, and it is a guess, I want to be very open about this, but my guess is that there isn't a specific, like, stand during or stand after, and it's one of those ones where I think there's legitimate interpretation, or legitimate conclusion during or after. I will say that the way I was trained would be after, but I would be hard-pressed to argue with any great fervor that standing during is wrong, except that we all should do it at the same time, that it is meant to be the whole body coming together, the body of Christ responding to the person of Christ and the priest of the head, responding, the prayer that I keep forgetting, but there's that. So I hope that answers your question. I suspect it isn't satisfying because it doesn't necessarily change one way or the other, but...
So is your decision that we're going to remain seated? Is that your decision?
I would say that I'm not interested in changing the way we're doing it right now, if I'm perfectly honest.
Okay.
Yeah, so whatever we've been doing now, which I think has been the priest finishes the prayer and then everybody stands up and does the response. I think at some point it'd be worth either catechizing on it as a whole community to go, here's why we've taken this interpretation. Or possibly maybe I wouldn't want to do it at a whole parish level. I'd probably want to do it at a liturgy commission level of going, which interpretation has the most backbone to it, the most, if you will, backing to it. And that would probably take a little bit of research on liturgical commentators. This is not church teaching, to be very clear, but there is a bishop, Bishop Peter Elliott, who was one of the foremost writers right after Vatican II. He's still alive, and he's written commentaries on the liturgies and all of the rubrics. And he's written 3 books. We used to use them in one of my last parishes. One's blue, one's green, one's red. Peter Elliott, look him up. Bishop Peter Elliott, I forget the titles of his books. But he might have some insight, because what he'll often do is say, here's the rubric, and here are the history and the references of why we did this or what the practice was. But I would say, to be honest, or to be frank, I hope I'm being honest the whole time, I wouldn't be real interested in making that change, because, let's be real, I have an emotional credit card and I can only cash out so much at a time, and I don't know that I want to spend it on that just yet. So I'm open to the conversation in a future time, I really am, but it wouldn't be something that I'd want to look at making alterations at this time. So
if we're talking about unity and when we should stand up, it would be great to also have somebody leading us in prayer, because we're not united in when we start our prayer. You can hear some people over here starting, people over here starting.
No, you're right.
We need either you, the deacon.
No, the priest probably needs to do some catechesis in general. I will say in English and in Spanish, and it's a bugaboo of mine. I'm sure it's a bugaboo of some of you. I hope I'm not alone in this. You know that person who says the Our Father louder than everyone else? Or slower than everyone else? Or just a smidge faster than everybody else? And I will admit, as I'm standing up there with my hands up, and I'm just like, slow down, speak soft, whatever it is. It would be nice if we all, it's one of the things we try to train our altar servers in, when they're walking together or moving. You don't want to be staring at each other as you're serving, but to kind of watch with your peripheral vision when they walk forward or when they step back. And there's a similar thing with us as congregants, as all of us, the body of Christ, especially when we're praying words together. And the big prayers of unity and the general instruction of the Roman Missal, I believe it's number 41. Believe it or not, I know some things. No, it's not 41. Belay my last. That's not the one it is. But general instruction Roman Missal talks about the 2 prayers that especially declare our unity. Of course, the whole Mass. Of course, every prayer. But the Our Father and the Creed. And it's a special sign of disunity when someone is praying faster, praying slower, praying loud, super loud, or whatnot. And the idea that we would, maybe not with our peripheral vision, but just with our own listening, to make sure that we are praying or singing together. And I think that, it's easy to get distracted. Even Father gets distracted, sometimes during Mass, sometimes during the Eucharistic prayer. I think to myself, did I take the bacon out of the freezer? Clearly not the right focus at Mass or whatnot. But you're not wrong, and I appreciate the reminder that it would be helpful to have catechesis on why we do and what we do. I'm not promising that's going to happen right away, but I appreciate the reminder nonetheless. Yeah. You, and then you. And then you third.
Yeah. The women of St. Joseph's meet down here 3 or 4 times a year, and
Yes.
we do rummage sales, we do the bazaar, and we've noticed in the last few years, some of us are getting older, and the stairs are turning into quite a headache. Mm-hmm. Yes. And so we're wondering if there's any ongoing discussion about how to relieve the lack of mobility. The ramp outside is full of cracks. And
I was afraid for a moment you were going to ask me how to relieve old age, and I'm like, funerals are the only solution I know. So, sorry, that was rather dark.
There you go. So we were just wondering, anything in the books about either fixing the ramp or putting a small elevator in, something that would.
So the general instruction of the no, that's not right either. So ramps or elevators or whatnot. Let me repeat the question for the recording. Are there any plans here at St. Joseph's in light of the age of the community and the demographics, which is a reasonable thing, especially I would say, I think Sequim is a destination parish for retirees. So there's no insult in that. It's a recognition of the reality. And so is there any kind of consideration or plans or ideas about elevators or ramps or various things? I think our biggest problem, honestly, we have money here at St. Joseph's. We have enough money that perhaps we might be considering why we have so much money and how we might use it in a way that isn't just sitting in a bank, in all honesty. And I don't mean that to anyone's shame, just that's a question we need to struggle with. That said, elevators are crazy expensive. I mean, they're just ridiculously pricey. And it isn't to say that I'm against it. I don't want to say that. But except to say, being able to put one in really would require, okay, what does that look like? How do we put it in? I understand that at some point, and excuse me, forgive me, my Diet Coke and burped into a microphone. I understand that at some point there was some conversation about putting a lift in outside, some sort of outdoor, I don't know that it'd be weatherproof, but at least outdoor lift. To be honest, I'm Switzerland on the whole thing. I'm happy to do it. The big thing really is to make sure that we put it in a way that A, is relatively fiscally responsible, and B, doesn't mar the whole layout of things or whatnot. Is there any plans? No plans have been discussed. I can't pretend that we've gone into any detail about that. I'm open to the conversation without, I want to be real non-committal at this point and say, I'm not against it. I don't have a horse in the race one way or the other. I'm certain at some point I will. But yeah, I don't know really what might be involved, except that it's not an insignificant thing. At one point there was also a conversation. Have you guys ever seen that movie Pixar's Up? Raise your hand if you have not seen Pixar's Up. Okay, look, you guys. If you have Disney Plus, it's on Disney Plus. If you have grandkids, you should watch it with them. It's about an old man. I mean, I kind of feel like it's relevant here. But there's one scene where the guy is going down his stairs, and those little stair climbers where you sit in a seat and it kind of goes all the way down.
Oh, the balloon man, sure.
The balloon man.
Yeah, the balloon guy. Yes, there you go. So we talked about getting one of those, but the problem was it wouldn't help the majority of people because it's too slow and only holds one person at a time. And financially, it's probably the cheapest of options, but it's the least useful of ones. So a lift and an elevator, I mean, it's doable. How it's doable or whatnot, I don't know. So the short answer to your question is, are there any plans? No. Are we against it? No, I'd be happy to explore it. But
how do we get looking into it? Because some of our women are now leaving the hall and they're going to do a prayer shawl group up in one of the classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not a whole lot of parking in the alley, so you still have to use the
or you still have to use the ramp to get down and go up and whatnot.
Go
Yeah.
up some more steps, so it's getting more dangerous.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, so.
And not only that, but they're carrying heavy things.
Right. No, it's. Please understand that I'm not in any way negating the fact that there's some kind of need for something. I also want to be very transparent that no, there aren't currently plans in place for that or whatnot.
Could I expound on that?
Oh, yeah,
we
please.
did 47 events down here, the Women in St. Joseph's last year. And that it has involved going up and down those stairs.
The stairs and the ramp, yeah.
And so it's becoming all, we've had 2 major rummage sales. We've had several events that, take a bazaar back and forth.
Yeah.
And so it's becoming to the point where we can't get down here.
Yeah.
And we can't get back out. Father Rob had a jubilee down here. He couldn't. It was difficult.
Yeah.
So, I guess the question to expound on that: could we really delve into making our parish hall, because it's the only one we have, more accessible?
Could we? Yes. What does that look like? I don't have a straightforward idea, in all honesty. So, you guys are aware that the parish, every parish, by both universal and local law, is required to have a pastoral council and a finance council. Did you guys know that?
Yeah.
So a pastoral council, to be clear, be very clear, the pastor's in charge. That's me. So, however, church law, universal church law, requires that I have a finance council, basically to make sure that I don't run off to Tahiti with all of your money, or spend it foolishly because my degree is in theology and not in finances or business administration, so that I have a group of people who are informed to help me avoid making stupid mistakes, to help me make good decisions, and also to help me discern where those decisions should go. The Finance Council primarily helps in the financial area. The Pastoral Council helps me make decisions about the future of the parish. Where do we go? What do we do? What do we focus on in our ministry? At Finance Council, we do have a Pastoral Council. I don't know the names of all of the members of the council. I do know this poor guy is about to have his name mentioned everywhere. So our Pastoral Council chair is Parish Salid. And I would very much like to encourage you to talk to him or to other pastoral council members, because what I would end up doing, in all frankness, is going to the pastoral council and saying, find the people to get a committee together to look at what it would cost. Find, what would it look like in construction and in work and in money, and what we would do. And then with the finance council, I would probably say, can we afford it? How can we afford it? And to be perfectly blunt, how do we make it a universal parish thing? So what other projects do we tie to it? Because to be perfectly honest, the elevator is not going to interest everybody. I know that it interests a lot of you here in this room, but in order to make it a universal parish thing, we'd probably do some other kind of renovation. For instance, replacing our plastic windows with real windows or something like that. So there are things that we can do in our parish. So I really would like to encourage you, and please understand, I'm not blowing you off. This isn't meant to be a, forget about that. But I can't do the work of that. So I really would encourage you to talk to our pastoral council about that.
We can do that.
The pastoral council actually has looked into that when I was on the parish council
How long ago were you on the parish council?
about 2 years ago.
Okay. Now sometimes I hear people, I was on the parish council 20 years ago or something. Yeah.
They had somebody who was going to donate some money, but they found out that an elevator is just, it has to be inspected and has some every year, and the cost was just.
And to be honest, it is entirely possible that it's not just a matter of how much money it costs, but the ongoing costs. I mean, we need to brace with the reality that it may not be feasible, period. But I'm happy to do the work of finding out whether or not it really is or isn't. But that's helpful. I mean, it's helpful history to have. Did you want to have a follow-up to this question or a new question?
No, I was going to do the next question.
Okay, before you do, you had your hand raised. Do you have a follow-up to
Well, I
that
did.
one? Okay.
I know that I keep John in the back room, and I know we have a kitchen remodel going on,
Yes.
and very thankful for that. In fact, we've done, as I said, 47 events down here that we haven't had a working kitchen. So
Yeah.
it is nice to have.
It'll be nice to have a working one soon.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, what my question is could we perhaps get a timeline on the progression of how, where we're at right now with the kitchen?
Oh, no, I don't have any information on that.
Okay.
Sorry. I apologize. I know that we're working on it, but I don't know what the timeline is.
Okay.
And to be perfectly honest, I think John snuck out exactly so that we wouldn't put it on the... He's gone. No, and I will tell you, by the way, just as a general thing, I've tried to avoid having staff be at these meetings because this isn't meant to be their on time. I do know that he and I talked about it as recently as today, and that he's like, yeah, it's kind of stalled out in recent days, and we really need to get working on it. So I know that it is on his mind, and not in the sense of like, oh, we should do something, but like, no, we're going to do something. But no, I don't know what the timeline is. Though, I will say, John's contact information is on our website. Be nice. I don't want to have 50 of you call and email him, all right? So pick one of you. But, and he's, John's a good guy. I want to make sure that's...
but we're not, yes.
Yeah, no pitch. I don't see any pitchforks, which is good. I appreciate that. Yeah,
I
no.
thought of confirmation.
Well, and I'll tell you, one of the things we talked about today, because of course I had a big sort of brain dump after coming back of like, all right, what happened to my parishes, who misbehaved, and what went well, and all those things. And he was talking about the kitchen, but we were also talking about particularly St. Joseph's and things like, gosh, we got to get this carpet out of here at some point because it's not the greatest to have a carpet in a church, especially if you spill. Sure, it'd be nice to get rid of all these plastic windows and put in actual energy-efficient double... Oh, no, wait a second. Double pane stuff. And also to talk about possibly putting in heat pumps because we had an issue with our heat recently where it was stuck at 78. So it was real exciting. So talking about new projects, not right away, but which could probably wrap into other greater projects. Yes, go.
I could just add to the windows a little bit. Those windows have been approved in a past budget when we had our working maintenance committee together under Father Rob when we did...
Some time ago, yeah.
Yeah, we did the entryway there.
Yeah, I'm afraid that project has fallen pretty well by the wayside.
Right,
So
but they were approved in a budget, so there was...
I'm sure there was money at some point. Father Dennis Robb was pastor how many years ago? 4 or 5 years ago?
Well, no, he was here, yes, for...
Yeah, a little bit back. So I don't mean to demean the approval, just that ship has sailed.
It should have been done.
Oh, I agree. I'm sorry. When I can lean against the windows and they go wiggle, 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 like these shouldn't be Jello-like. That's not okay. So no, the windows are absolutely one of my priorities. Along with I heard someone whoop when I mentioned heat pumps. None of you are going to whoop as much as me as I'm sweating with my big old vested self at Mass. So anyway, I mentioned that because I want you to know that we're not just thinking about what's going on now, but also we have ideas that we want to propose to the councils and propose to the community to get you all, to get you excited. We want things that you are excited about, that are meaningful to you. And I'm not against the elevator. I do want to make sure that it's feasible, but I can't give you, exactly what that's going to look like in the near future. Did you have your hand raised as a follow-up, or?
Yeah, well, I used to live in a parish that put in an elevator, and the parish grew so fast, I don't know, it cost like over $100,000 to put it in. 5 years later, they didn't use it anymore because they had to build a new church.
You had to build a new church.
So we have to figure out how fast this parish is going to grow before we stick too much on it.
Well, and I will dangle a little carrot in front of you guys in the sense of like future plans. And this isn't super near future. This is further down the road. So this Mass rescheduling, the Vigil Masses and the Sunday Masses, the reason that I have to have 4 Masses between Queen of Angels and St. Joseph's is because if I were to cut even one of them, there wouldn't be enough Masses for people to fit into the churches, given our capacity and our current attendance. And with 4 Masses, I won't say we're super close to capacity, but we're pretty close. And so I'm already thinking about, I need a new church. Now, I will tell you a couple of my wild-brained ideas, but I want to give a caveat. And there's a recording here of me saying this to you, so if you spread rumors, YouTube will know, okay? So, none of this is hard and fast. All of this is speculative. I don't need you going home and saying, Father Maurer said he's going to tear down our churches and build his own church. Cool your jets. But we do need a bigger church. And my thought is, the 2 thoughts that come to my mind are, 1, we could buy a plot of land between Queen of Angels and St. Joseph, somewhere equidistant, and build a giant church that could fit twice as many people and keep the 2 parishes as chapels. That's one idea, but that means we have more buildings to maintain and more things to keep track of, which is not the end of the world, but it is a thing. Another thought is, we tear down everything that St. Joseph owns and build one giant church the length of the property with a full basement, perhaps a little bit of office space, get rid of the rectory, rejigger this. So basically we have a lot of meeting space underneath the church and a giant church. Right? These are dreams. I want to be very clear. Nothing's happening right away. No rumors, please. No pitchforks either. So things like that. So your question about, what about the future? It's on my mind. And the big hardship really is building something like that. It's going to be a years-long process. So it might be worthwhile to invest the money in a lift or an elevator right now, or, depending on how much cost it is and how feasible or unfeasible it is, we might say, we're going to need to bear with this for a couple of years because in 2 or 3 years we're going to be doing a major capital campaign project for a new church. Now, again, all of that is speculative. I really don't want you to, worry if you are worried about that, or get too excited if you're excited about it, because that's still, honestly, a ways down the road. But it's not that far away in as much as we are pretty well at capacity. And honestly, with this Mass schedule change, I'm only allowed to do 3 Masses on a Sunday max, and I'm going to be maxed out starting in January. And we want to grow. We want to have more people coming to church and meeting Christ and being part of our community. But, if there's no space for them, obviously that's a good problem to have, but it is a problem. We'll have to deal with it. So, follow-up or new question?
Follow-up.
Follow-up. Fire away.
Okay, when Father Nathan was here, I was on the parish council.
Yes.
And they actually have plans made up, I thought, to go
That's exciting.
a church and have the church face this direction instead of like this.
Yeah.
It would cover over the.
So you're proposing that we might already have some sort of blueprints built up of.
Yeah, I think.
That's exciting. I would like to see those blueprints.
Yeah.
I'm certain I have some thoughts about those blueprints.
But there was really, and then another option was to this land that's over here by the by 101 that's got all the Gary oak trees and stuff.
Sure.
in it. That was a possible place to build.
Possible to
a church
build,
too.
yeah. No, the exciting thing, honest to God, and again, I can't promise anything, and there's some speculation here. Once we get ourselves stabilized with some of the liturgical things and the Mass schedule things, we're in a really good, particularly our 2 parishes, Queen of Angels and St. Joseph's, are very healthy in the way of attendance, in the way of finances. Don't get me wrong, we could be healthier. And I'm going to be telling you about it this weekend. So, just brace yourself for that. And just you think, I'm not going to come to Mass this week, I'm going to go to Port Townsend. I just delivered today at the USPS letters. You're not going to escape me. You're all going to get letters from me asking for your support. But we're pretty good. We're doing pretty well. But, where was I going to go with that? I managed to distract myself out of the conversation. But yeah, we're looking down the road at we need to grow, we need to build, we're going to need to, and it's kind of exciting. Once we get sort of the stability stuff, it's just fun to go, what could we possibly do that we're not doing or build that we don't have yet built? And I've only been part of a building project once where I was part of the building of the thing, and it was an altar. And I'll tell you, building an altar is lots of fun. Guys, I want to build a church. It would be really cool to dream about, like, what does a beautiful church look like? How do we make it ours, with the choosing of the saints and stained glass or statuary or just the design. I mean, I live my life in black and white, but it'd be really fun to throw some color into a church and see what we can do. So I'd be curious to see if you have any more information about the blueprints, maybe afterwards or in the future, or if you know who to talk to. Maybe not right now, but in the future.
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember.
All right, so I'm going to move us on to another subject because I want to be able to cover a multitude of topics. You've been patiently waiting, you, and then you, and then you, okay, just so that we know where we're going. Fire us
I
off.
want to address the faith formation for children. When I was watching EWTN, there was a gentleman who started a company in 2014, and he started it because he was a faith formation leader. And what he addressed was the fact that people didn't want to come to, the kids didn't want to come to faith formation because it was boring, and that the parents didn't want to drive the kids to faith formation. So he developed the iPad for faith formation, and I gave the information to Cece, and I gave the information to Garth. And I think it would be really nice as a church. They have over 200 schools that are on this iPad, and the children just love it. And they can't go anywhere, if they take it home, and they can't go anywhere, outside on this iPad. And it's all Christian, it's all Catholic, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful program for the kids.
So effectively, you're offering your wholehearted endorsement of this iPad program for children.
I am, because
Thank you.
I think it would be wonderful because kids love iPads. All the faith formation is on the iPad, and the teachers really have access to the iPads, and it would just be, it's all in there, the Catholic, what the CCC
Sure. Catechism of the Catholic Church.
says,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, and I'll offer this. One of the things that we're working to do with all of our parishes, I don't want to say standardize in the way of make everything the same sort of mold, but we're really trying to make it so all 4 of our parishes and our St. Thomas mission have a consistent practice of faith formation. So even though the schedules might be different, because Forks is a different area and community than Sequim and Port Angeles and Port Townsend, but that we have a similar program with similar timelines and similar expectations and similar, if you will, topics that we're covering. And so we're in the process, basically, there was no way that we were going to make any changes this year with the whole transition and Partners in the Gospel. But what we're doing right now is Garth, who is our Director of Faith Formation in all of Collin County, and Patrick, who is our Faith Formation Director at Port Townsend, are working together right now to talk about what are they doing in their programs, what do their programs look like, again, what is the timeline, expectations, and topics and goals, and then go, okay, how do we make these into a kind of, not conformity, but consistency, so that if you were to send your kid to Port Townsend, and maybe for some reason you missed a class there, you could come to Sequim, and it would be a similar program and a similar timeline. And similarly I think it's very common to have cross-pollination between our 2 central parishes. I don't know how many of you go out to Forks, except for vacation, but similarly too. I will say that moving to a technology-based faith formation program can be very difficult. It's a high price of entry to spend all that money on devices. And it can also be a high price of change in teaching models, because you go from being in person and being with the parents to having that to having that mediation of the digital. And I'll be honest, I'll be rather frank, trying to be honest all the time, but be frank, that I'd be a little nervous about introducing technology at that broad of a level, because we have so much screen time in our days and so much screen time in our kids. And one of the things that I think is a really helpful thing is when we're breaking away from that and work on the personal level. And again, I don't mean to make a judgment on the program that you're offering, except to say we're looking at a broad scale between our parishes, and we also want to be cautious about major changes that would shift the entire paradigm of how we teach. But you said that you had offered it to Cece and to Garth, and I would encourage you to have those conversations with them.
Yeah, it's called CatholicBrain.com, and
Okay.
you can go and look on.
CatholicBrain.com.
And
Thank you very
look at it. And I just thought it was wonderful when they were talking about it because of the fact that, the kids would have the iPad here. They would have the iPad at home, they'd have
Sure.
it here, they'd be able to have it
No,
at all.
it's one of the great blessings of the modern age, honestly. There are so many different ways that we can engage with the faith, and I very much enjoy that. And again, here I am recording for YouTube. I'm going to post it on my blog. Those of you who are on social media have seen me posting on Facebook and Twitter. I'm certain all of you engage in different ways as well. And I see at least one of you scrolling on your phone, so, sorry. But nonetheless, don't look around, don't be judging each other. But, there's different ways to do these things, and they really are a blessing, honestly. So it's a gift. But, yeah, I would say engaging with CC and with Garth, and perhaps with Patrick, if you are on board towns, might be the way to start.
All right, well, thank you.
Yeah, and I think you were next?
Yeah, speaking of altars,
Yes.
which relic do we have here?
Oh,
St. Joseph.
you're going to make me do research, because I have no idea what relic we have at the altar.
Yes, so I think that would be wonderful for our parishioners to know and to know more about that saint.
How much do you want to know? How badly do you want to know? Do you really want to know?
I think everybody should.
I'm asking you. I want you to know that I am very interested in this question. So there's a couple things. If it's really easy, there'll be a plaque in our sacristy that says this church was dedicated on this day with the saint. A lot of churches have them, especially churches that have been around for, I would say, 75 or years or more. Sometimes that plaque gets lost, and in which case you have to call the archdiocese, and maybe they've lost it. And the worst case scenario, you have to go into the altar, dig out the relic, which we are not doing, by the way, and there's usually a piece of paper that's inside with the relic. So I will tell you what I will do. I will go look tomorrow at Mass, because I have Mass tomorrow, and I will include in the, if you will, the show notes of the YouTube thing on my blog, if I find it, okay? If I remember, I might even crawl up there tonight before I go home and go and check it out. Do you know the answer?
No, it's
Well, you got my hopes up and everything.
this past Wednesday, we did a walk through the Mass, and two of the people there were saying, well, whose relic
Somebody is there.
Yeah. All right, if you're raising your hand, I want to know if you know the saint. Otherwise, I'm going to move to the next question.
What?
Are you raising your hand because you know the saint?
We don't have a
We don't have no relic.
That's what I want to tell you.
We don't have a relic in our altar?
No.
Well, you just took my bubble and burst it. But you know what that might mean? That might mean our altar needs to be consecrated. Oh. Okay. All right. So I'm going to make a note out loud so we hear it on the recording, because what that means is I need to call the liturgy office. Because truly, altars are meant to be consecrated with a relic in it. And if our altar doesn't have a relic, we might need to either A, have a relic be put in, or B, we might need to build a new altar. Have I mentioned how cool that is? But let me double check all of that, truly. So, and I mean that sincerely. I'll look it up. I'm not brushing that aside. Yes, young lady. That's you, yeah.
My understanding is the relic at Queen of Angels is the Archangel Raphael. And the reason that they chose an angel or an archangel is because it's Queen of Angels Church.
I mean, I understand maybe the dedication, but there's no way there's a relic of an archangel. Because that means the archangel died and we got a piece of their body, which I have so many questions. So, but it's entirely possible. So, bells are...
Dedication.
It might be a dedication. Here's an interesting little tidbit. By the way, I want to just mention how cool Catholicism is. So we have church bells here at St. Joseph's and over at Queen of Angels. I understand that we've got them. I think you realize that our rope is
Right.
our rope is real funky, guys. But I don't know if you know this. I didn't know this until I had a priest tell me who was of the older rite. In the old days, before Vatican II, and it's not required, although I think it's still permitted, bells, like the altars, were consecrated with holy oils and given the name of a saint. And once they were blessed, when you rang the bell, anyone who heard the bell ring was also receiving a blessing. And they were often consecrated to a saint, including the archangels, which wouldn't involve a relic, of course, but that. So, again, I'm speculating wildly whether or not that bell was consecrated, if that's what you're remembering. But of course, I can guarantee that there's no relic of an archangel in our altar, because, again, I would have so many questions. Did you have a follow-up to that?
New topic.
Okay, hang on. There was one guy who had a follow-up, I thought, over here. Or okay, and I thought I also pointed to someone else for a new question over here.
Well, I was going to say with the relics that I remember a couple of years ago they were going to put it in and they lost it.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, nonetheless, we're going to have to track that down. It's very clear to me that's going to have to be a priority of sorts, because every altar is supposed to have a relic, particularly because the idea being that our church is not just the church of this community, but that we are quite literally founded on the lives and offering an example of the saints. Obviously, representing Christ's sacrifice, but also following in the footsteps of those who have gone before us. So, I'm a little excited about building a new altar, though. Did you have? I thought I pointed to you for a new question, but no.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Father, every Friday, you have 3 priests at Queen of Angels.
Yes.
Next Friday is a holy day.
Yes.
The priests are not 3 there. They're each at their own site.
That's right.
Would you ever consider the first Friday doing the same thing?
No, let me repeat your question. So, would Father, you point out rightly that not every Friday, we only do it twice a month. Twice a month, the priests do, actually the answer is yes, but you don't know that. Let me repeat your question first for the recording. So you asked, Father, I've noticed that priests are often together at the Friday Mass for the school Mass, which is correct, twice a month, the second and fourth Friday of the month. They are all at Queen of Angels. Would I ever consider having the first Friday where the priests were spread out? And initially, I will tell you the answer was no, because I wanted all the priests to be at every Mass, and I was also anticipating we were going to go down to 2 priests, so we were all living centrally, and all of that was before kind of some changes happened mid-August. However, but when we all went separately our different locations, Father Ed and Father Golly both said, hey, we've got a lot of people who want to have First Friday Masses. We'd like to find a way to offer that to them so we can offer First Friday Masses. So we did what you're describing, and you might not be aware of it, and we didn't really proclaim it, so I apologize for that confusion. So what we do is that all 3 priests, because it's really important to me as pastor that our school, which is one of our primary missions, it's our biggest ministry, if you will. We have 190 some kids at the school. That our school not only... I am there almost every day of the week in the morning at drop-off. So Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm there at 8 o'clock with the kids with a cup of coffee in my hand. I have much less energy than they do, but greeting them as they're running around and then praying with them. And then every Thursday, I go into the classrooms. I visit 2 classrooms, and they have a question and answer box. A lot like this. Much lesser questions. What's your favorite color? What hair product do you use? One of my favorites. Although sometimes they come up with some really big ones like, could Hitler be in heaven? Interesting question. The answer is yes, by the way. We believe in the saving power of Christ. Just, dwell on that for a while and pray over whatever that brings up. So it's really, the reason I bring it up, it's really important to me that not only am I present to the school, but that all of our priests have some presence at the school. So what I have decided, and I will be very blunt, this was definitely a pastor prerogative, that I decided that I would require all of the priests, barring some crazy emergency or whatnot, to be at the school masses twice a month. So they are there at the second and fourth Friday of the month. Now, by the way, this also coincides, twice a month we get together the Thursday night before for fraternal nights, because we are living alone and we're pretty isolated from the rest of our brother priests. So every second and fourth Thursday, we have dinner together, we want to play games together, we want to watch movies or hang out together or whatnot. So it's sort of a package deal. The second and fourth Thursday night, and then Friday, we have this fraternal night, and then we have the school mass with the kids, and then I visit the kids on Thursdays, Father Ed and Father Gallo visit the kids on those Fridays. But, sorry, back to your question, that's all the pretext. We realized that with the living separately, and with all the driving, the coming out every week, we would quickly come to resent all that driving. And so we're only doing it twice a month. And we decided to do it the second and fourth Friday of the month so that First Friday Masses could be offered across the parish family. Now, the one place First Friday Masses are not going to be offered is St. Joseph, because the school Mass is going to take priority. And those days when Father Ed is out in... Father Ed is going to be on First Fridays in St. Anne's, and Father Galli is going to be at Port Townsend on those First Fridays. So if you're a St. Joseph parishioner and you want to have a First Friday Mass, you're going to have to go over to Queen of Angels. And to be perfectly honest, or to be perfectly blunt, this isn't a matter of like, I'm sticking it to the St. Joseph guys, like, I like Queen of Angel better. It's not like that at all. The fact of the matter is, Friday Mass is the day for the school Mass, and it was chosen for that day specifically because it was most convenient for our school. Cece and I sat down and I'm like, I need to know which day works best for you. It was one of my top priorities, and she was like, Fridays would be the best day. And so I chose Fridays because it fits best academically and with whatever their school schedule is. And so one of us has to be there, and we wanted to offer First Fridays in a broad way. This is a consequence not of sin, not of wrongdoing, but of the priest shortage. Because in an ideal world, we'd have a priest at every single location. And unfortunately, St. Joseph gets the short end of the stick on this one, and it's not personal, and it's not a poke against you, but it is the reality of where we're at right now. So on one hand, I get to tell you, yes, First Fridays are being offered across most of the parishes. On the other hand, not at St. Joseph's, and also not at St. Thomas at the mission either. But I suspect that's a small comfort. So, yeah, I'm sorry. I realize that's not as satisfying an answer, but we're trying. We really are. We were trying to spread ourselves out in a way to offer as much as we can to the most, but we're also limited in that way. All right. I believe this young man was first, and then I'll go to you. And then there was someone over here who just raised their hand, but I didn't see who. So you, and then you. Yeah.
Father, I have a short question. Why can't we have a sign of peace among the parishioners at daily Mass? Because we have almost the same people that come every daily Mass. And it was so good to be able to turn around and greet all of your friends. Yeah. And I would like to have that put back in.
Yeah. So you're asking, why can't we have the sign of peace at daily Mass? I will tell you, this is up to the priest. And the rubrics specifically say that the sign of peace is actually an optional addition. So it's not the default. The default is not to have the sign of peace. And the sign of peace, I omit the sign of peace primarily because the daily Mass is not the height of a Sunday Mass. And the Church offers us this idea, I don't know where the phrase came from, but it's this idea of what's called progressive solemnity. So the higher the order of the Mass, you guys probably know that there are levels of Masses. So the lowest level of Mass is a daily Mass. And the next level of Mass is what's called the memorial, usually for a saint. And then the next level of Mass is a feast for a saint or for a celebration of Christ. And then the highest level is a solemnity, which is Sundays and holy days and whatnot. So on a solemnity, you pull all the stops out. You do all the chant, you do all the singing, you do all the options. You often use Eucharistic Prayer 1 because it's the one with all the saints. You often do all of the things. And then as you go down the levels of Mass, you reduce some of those things because although every Mass is dignified and every Mass is a representation of Christ's sacrifice on the cross, not every Mass is the highest level of solemnity. And one of the ways that we reflect that is by not having all the options at the daily Mass. The other part of it is that even though our daily Masses are not real conducive to those who are working, folks who are coming in between work or whatnot, 9:30 a.m. is pretty much a retiree time if you're a 9-to-5 worker. But we want to be mindful, too, that the daily Mass is a come in, celebrate Mass, and then get on with the day. And not that we're in a rush, but we're not adding extra things as an ordinary course of things because it's meant to be a pause to celebrate the Mass and then continue forward. Could I offer the sign of peace? Yes, I could. I've chosen not to for those reasons, and I will admit that those reasons are not necessarily convincing. I can see that they're not, but at the same time, those are the reasons for why I don't add them at the daily Mass. I will offer you a bit of a caution, or at least a warning. It is also my practice during Lent to not have the sign of peace even at Sunday Mass, as a way of adding sobriety to that season of fasting and penitence. And then at Easter, we bring it back as a way of celebrating the celebration of Easter. So brace yourself for that possibility as well. Yeah, no, and I understand that too. I mean, it is a lessening of something that we're used to. I would propose that very often we remove things not because the thing itself is bad, but so that we appreciate it when we've got it. This is similar to why we abstain from meat on Fridays during Lent, and in fact, we are invited by our bishops to make some sort of sacrifice every single Friday, not because meat is bad. Again, I just talked about, thinking about bacon on Sundays and other times of the week as well, but because by removing something that optionally, or that we don't have to do, at least not by physical demands, we appreciate all the more when we have it or we have other blessings. But I can respect that that's not necessarily super convincing. I appreciate that, but that at least is the explanation for it. Yes?
Yes, Father. How do you respond to people who may now come up to communion
with their arms crossed? Yeah.
With their arms across.
Yep.
Do you not want them to come up at all in that form?
So what should we do? What is the response of the priest when someone comes up with their arms crossed? And also, would it be better for them not to come up? So I will answer the question in reverse course, if you will. So if communion is, and it is, the time for receiving communion, the ideal is that those who are not receiving communion remain seated at that time. And I think I have done a few times. I've certainly done it at funerals and weddings, and I've done it at the school Mass. I'm not sure if I've done it at Sunday Mass. I've done this thing where I invite people to pray an act of spiritual communion. It's on page 330 of the Breaking Bread in the Missal. And if that doesn't sound familiar, then I probably haven't done it at Sunday Mass, and I could stand to do it. So in the ideal world, if you're not receiving communion, you remain seated, because really coming forward is the communion procession to receive communion. However, but, and I think I know that I reflected on this in that blog post, fathermaurer.com, you should go there. On the blog post, I talked about a conversation I had with Archbishop Sarton, our previous Archbishop. He and I were chatting about this very subject, and he says, we want to find some way to acknowledge someone who comes up, and maybe it's a kid who comes up who mom's got in tow, and she's not leaving him in the pew because he's going to cause problems. Or maybe it's the spouse of someone who's not Catholic but wants to stay with their spouse. Or maybe it's a visitor who just doesn't know what they're doing, and they come up and someone says, cross your arms, you're not Catholic, or whatnot. And so what I do, and I don't know how obvious it is to those who are watching, or maybe even the person, if someone comes up with their arms crossed, and I've been doing this since I got here. Again, you're reminding me that I need to be proclaiming this a little more so people know. When someone comes up with their arms crossed, I will bow to them, and I basically say something to the effect of, may the Lord be with you always, or some sort of greeting, just so that they don't feel like, well, I came up and Father just sort of glared at me till I walked away. Like that's no place to leave anybody, and that's certainly not my intention. I think in an ideal world, I think the Church does envision that if someone's not receiving communion, they remain seated. But we're always going to have somebody who comes up for some reason, and usually they're good reasons. They're not malicious or meant to be rebellious. But yeah, how does that strike you, or does that help answer your question?
Yes, it answers the question, but for a while it seemed like we were encouraging people to come.
Oh boy. No, you're absolutely right. There has been a couple of generations, I think, where people were invited, if you're not receiving communion, cross your arms and come. All I can say to that is that's definitely incorrect. Like, that's definitely not found in any church teaching. And I really would refer you to fathermaurer.com. I tried to, by the way, on that blog post, because I covered 3 different changes. The third one, you can click on it and it'll jump right to the blessings at communion. And it talks about what is intended at communion. And to be very clear again, this isn't about Father Maurer's preferences. This isn't about practicalities. This is really about the principles of what we believe, and even a little bit of policy, if you will. The Archbishop wrote some things, not specifically on this, but that contribute to this. But really it is, at the end of the day, the goal of Mass is twofold. The very first goal of Mass, the primary goal, the goal that is above all else, is not the reception of communion, but the representation of Christ's sacrifice on the cross by the people of God, led by the priest in the person of Christ, representing, not re-sacrificing, but representing Christ's sacrifice to our Heavenly Father. And so you may notice that during the Eucharistic prayer, usually when the priest has his hands like this, he is leading the prayer, so usually it's only the priest speaking, but he's leading the prayer on behalf of the community to God the Father. So speaking in the place of Christ the Son to God the Father. And so our primary purpose at Mass isn't the reception of communion, but the offering of the Eucharist to God the Father, offering of the sacrifice to God the Father. And then part of that offering, as Christ said at the Last Supper, take this all of you and eat it, take all of it and drink of it, that we actually do that. So in an ideal world, everybody's receiving communion. Now to do that, you need to go to confessions, which are offered from 3 to 4 o'clock here at Queen of Angels at St. Joseph's, and be in a state of grace. And if you're under 59, wherever you may be, once you hit 59, by the way, you're no longer bound by the fast, the Eucharistic fast. I don't know if you knew that. So if you're 59 or older, you can have that cup of coffee before Mass. Or you could, keep the fast if you want. Anyway, but long story short, yes, people were invited to come forward. I would assert pretty strongly that was well-intentioned, genuinely well-intentioned, but not appropriate. Yeah. I will also say we had one of our RCIA volunteers come to me a little distressed, like not angry or upset, but just a little distressed. She said, "Father, I was just encouraging the RCIA students very recently, and now I have to go and kind of explain." And she said, "And I appreciate knowing that, but you need to know that people have been encouraged." So I often present, and I mean to present, a lot of confidence and enthusiasm about these things. One of the things I hope I don't present, but I recognize that there's a pretty strong risk and maybe even a reality of presenting maybe more about facts and figures than about people and feelings. And it is my sincere hope that folks who do come up with their arms crossed never feel, and I don't want them to feel, like they are less than, or that they are being judged, or that they're unwelcome. And I think that's a very important thing. I would be very grateful if you hear people say that you would convey that sentiment on my behalf, and that you would help them to understand what we're trying to accomplish, that the communion time is for communion, and also that a blessing will be offered for all in just a few minutes after communion time. So, all right. Yes, you, and then there was somebody over there. I think the lady with the hoodie and the black face mask. Yes?
Well, I'm jumping ahead to Christmas Eve and Christmas Day.
Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Tell me more.
We have in the past always had, when we got reduced to priests, a Mass on Christmas Eve and a Mass on Christmas Day.
Okay.
Will we still have that this year, or will there only be one midnight Mass, one place?
It feels like you're asking two different questions. Will there be a Christmas Eve and a Christmas Day, and then will there only be one midnight Mass? The answer is yes to all of those. So we will only have one midnight Mass, and we will have also a Christmas Eve and a Christmas Day. I'm not sure, but I think we're having two Christmas Day because I don't think we can fit everybody. But I'm not 100%. I should remember. Right, no, I'm pretty certain we're having two Christmas Day. I don't remember the schedule. I got to be very honest. Although, you can go to my website, fathermaurer.com. I'm actually excited about this.
I was on it today.
Is the Christmas Mass schedule not on there?
See it.
Well, then it's not on there.
Is there? There's a 24 and 25.
Okay.
Is it on the website for the parish, or is it
No, it would be on my
Is there
website.
Sequim?
We have not put the liturgical calendar on the parish website, so
It says it's in Sequim.
I don't know. I can't verify that. But I can definitely tell you that the liturgical calendar is on fathermaurer.com. And particularly there's a drop-down menu on my website that says like Parish Family 49, which is our number.
Yeah.
And if you click on the calendars, and it even says liturgical calendar, and then in parentheses, beta. So this was the test run of it.
I haven't.
Yeah, no, and I apologize for that. We only literally just last week finished updating all of our calendars, the liturgy calendar, the faith formation calendar, and the parish life calendar, so things that aren't faith formation or liturgy. And I do want to let you know, pretty much to the minute, it's been 24 hours since our plane landed. So I promise I haven't been holding out on you. My next step is to get the liturgy calendars on our parish website, but I don't know. So I would encourage you to go to fathermaurer.com and go to the drop-down menu for the liturgy calendars. I will tell you my website's a little slow, because it's a little slow, so bear with it, but the liturgy calendar is up. It's up to date, because whenever they update it in the office, it automatically gets transmitted out. But if it's not there, it's probably because we had our liturgy meeting right before I left. I will tell you, I know that we have a Vigil Mass, We have a midnight mass. I would swear we have two daytime masses. The big caveat is because there was a midnight mass, and the choir directors and I think all the liturgical leaders were with me, we're not having an 8:30 in the morning mass, because I will be the grumpiest Grinch of Christmas Day at 8:30 in the morning. Merry stinking Christmas to all of you. But I don't know the schedule. I mean, so, teasing aside, I'm not sure.
No, because we always have a good turnout.
Oh yeah, no, Christmas masses. Well, yeah, and we want to offer that, and we want to do that. And I think as well, Christmas Mass is often a good indicator of what our growth might look like if we really did begin to grow in a serious way. All right, all you people in the front row who are chatting, the principal can see you. Yeah. All right. Young lady in the back with the mask and the hoodie.
Father, this may have been explained previously, but I wondered why the tabernacle has a covering over it.
More liturgical questions. I love it when you ask liturgical questions. She asks, why does the tabernacle have a cover over it? The general instruction of the Roman Missal actually mandates that every tabernacle be veiled. And it's not required, but it is traditional that the veil match the liturgical color of the day or of the season. The idea basically being that we are, I think it's St. Paul who says, he talks about the different dignity of the different members of Christ, and some have the gift of this and some have the gift of that, and no member is more important, but it's often the case that we cover those parts that are more intimate and more important, and we leave uncovered those parts that are more common or more regular. And that applies as well to the different parts of the church. And so the tabernacle, which is holding the most important, which is carrying Christ itself, is veiled except in those times when it's opened up. And as far as I remember it, I could be wrong, it's been known to happen, but I'm fairly confident, like to a great degree, that it is actually required that the tabernacle be veiled in some way. In some churches, the veil is just in front of the doors. So it's just the doors have these little sort of rails in front of them, and it's just there. And then I think it's here at St. Joseph we have a veil that's all the way around. It is the devil to take off when I have to open that door, let me tell you. It's not the most convenient thing, but it is a practice of our faith to veil the tabernacle as a way of dignifying it. As a way of honoring it. So, yeah, and you might notice that some churches, anybody here been to St. Mary Star of the Sea in Port Townsend? Next time you're there, you might notice when the ciborium, it's like a chalice with a cover, when it's taken out of the tabernacle, it has a veil over it as well. And I believe that's not mandated by the church, but it's sort of a more traditional, traditional practice. The idea that if the tabernacle is supposed to be veiled, of course the smaller container, that would be sort of a mini tabernacle, would be veiled. But I don't think that's liturgical law. So, hope that answers that question. All right, we're winding up close to 8 o'clock. Oh, look at these hands pop up. So the young lady with the, I almost named your hair color, but you, and then the long-haired lady behind her. All right, yes, that's you, short hair, yes, you.
Okay, another liturgical question.
I love it, give me liturgical questions all night.
At adoration, you had made an announcement that the host would be proposed after the benediction, and right after the benediction, that the host and the monstrance would be proposed in the tabernacle, and then the divine praises were to be said, which felt funny to me because I like the divine praises with the host.
With the host.
And that's what I was looking up. It could be done either way, and I've noticed it's gone back to being done the way I like it, and I'm hoping that it changes.
I'm so excited. You got me up like a dog wiggling here. So your question, first of all, when are the divine praises supposed to be sung at adoration? Is it before the Blessed Sacrament is returned to the tabernacle or afterwards? And you're absolutely right. You've named the problem. There's no liturgical law, or rather, there wasn't. So, I kid you not, this was what's called a lacuna in the law, a hole in the law that was not. And much like the standing at the Orate fratres, it can be interpreted either way. There was actually even less rubrics about this. And so the bishops of the United States, the bishops, by the way, are genuinely helpful to us. Every now and then, they overlook something, like December 8th, and they cause pastors everywhere to freak out. But the bishops recognized that there was no order of adoration liturgically approved. And so what you have there are actually liturgical books that some say divine praises before, and then others say divine praises afterwards. And it gives us clergy a fit. Because, of course, you're very kind in your preference. Like, well, I like it this way. But some people are like, you're a heretic because you did it wrong. And I came to adoration today, and me and Jesus agreed that you're doing it wrong. Always a fun conversation to have as a priest. So the bishops put out a new book. It got approved by Rome recently, and I'm pretty sure it's already published. It's Adoration and Worship of Holy Communion Outside of Mass. It's an official liturgical book, and it includes the order of adoration and tells you when the divine praises are supposed to be. And you're going to ask me next, so when is it? And all I'm going to tell you is, 3 days before I went on vacation, I went onto CatholicBookPublishing.com and ordered $1,000 worth of liturgical books because we needed a bunch of them. And that was one of them. They haven't arrived yet, so I don't know. But I am eagerly looking forward to finding out when we're supposed to do the divine praises.
I was looking it up and I got the San Diego Catholic one.
Yeah.
Their huge document, and it said either one.
And I will tell you that it's in the Rite, it's in the ritual book. I know this because one of my buddies got it. He bought the book, he pre-ordered it because he's a jerk and he's smarter than I am, and he ordered it ahead of time. I did not. So we haven't gotten the books yet. I will say, by the way, liturgical books are not like required to be a cleric to buy them. So if you want to spend $15 and buy that liturgical book, CatholicBookPublishing.com. I don't even earn a commission for spouting them. Might be overkill buying a whole book for one question, but and to be honest, I don't know which one it's supposed to be. Here's the terrible thing: is it would be really funny if they're like, yeah, you can do it either way. That would be the real irony if they decided they were not going to finally nail that down. But no, I don't actually know. But you've basically outlined the situation as it exists, and on behalf of the Catholic Church, I'm sorry. All right, young lady with the long hair.
Okay, mine's also on adoration. Is there a reason we don't have an adoration chapel here at St. Joseph, and might we get?
Why don't we have an adoration chapel at St. Joseph? I don't know why we don't have an adoration chapel. That requires either sort of partitioning off a part of the church or building a new building, so otherwise you just use the church. I can tell you in general, which may answer the specific, in general we don't have perpetual adoration because we don't have enough people to man the station. And when you have an adoration chapel, the Eucharist is to remain exposed the entire time. Some churches, some tabernacles, will be the kind that you can put a veil down over, you can cover up. This is wildly inappropriate. Like we were just talking about benediction and exposition. That's supposed to be done by somebody who is commissioned by the pastor, that's me, to expose or repose the sacrament if it's not a cleric. And so having somebody sort of flip, close, and shut the tabernacle, it's a novelty, and I suppose it's a practicality in certain areas if you're in a really remote area. We are not. And so you really should have someone exposing and reposing the sacrament. And if you have an adoration chapel, you have to have our archbishop, I believe it was 2 archbishops ago, Archbishop Brunette, mandated. It's not liturgical law, but I do believe it's archdiocesan policy, but I'm not 100% on that. But I'm pretty sure he mandated that there's a minimum of 2 people present whenever the Blessed Sacrament is exposed. And I will say, that makes good sense. If someone needs to use the restroom, the Eucharist should not be left alone. If someone has an emergency, similarly, and so on and so forth. Our biggest struggle, because we do have adoration here on Thursdays, and at Queen of Angels on Fridays, and I think we have evening adoration on Tuesdays as well. Our biggest difficulty for daytime adoration is we don't have that many people. And there have been a number of times where I'll come back over for benediction, and there's only a handful or even less, like 2 or 3 people in the church. And I think one of the struggles, and I don't mean this to be an indictment, I have my own struggles with prayer, but I think one of the struggles that we have as Catholics is we want the Eucharist to be available whenever we're ready to go, but committing to that 24-hour schedule, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, that could be a real difficulty. So, am I open to having an adoration chapel? I will say, much like the elevator, yes, I am. But that one I would be even more strict of like, we need to really build up a core of people, which would probably be, realistically speaking, 75 to 100 people who are, because you don't want to have the same person doing 8 o'clock in the morning every single day of the week for the rest of their lives. And you might only want to do it once a week, every other week, or once a month. But that requires a great number of people. And you didn't ask this question, but I want to offer it as reassurance for folks. One of the things that I've seen be very successful in parishes is when we have adoration sort of surges of opportunities for adoration, like 40-hour devotion, or even committing ourselves to, well, we have the Saturday morning Mass, so we're going to do adoration from Saturday morning, either before Mass, up to Mass, or after Mass until noon, or something like that, where it's a short amount of time that's convenient for a good amount of folks. There's no point in doing a surge of adoration at 3 o'clock in the morning. Your priest is going to resent you and no one's going to show up. But doing it at a time that works so that people have an opportunity, because the point of adoration ultimately is to meet Jesus, to come and meet Jesus in the Eucharist. And building those little opportunities over time so that people begin to have what I suspect you already have, which is a thirst for adoration, but we have enough people with that same thirst that we could support long-term adoration or even an adoration chapel. Again, I feel like I'm saying this a lot. I don't know how satisfying that answer is, but I think that's probably a good statement of where we're at now. Did you have a follow-up to that? Or a new question?
Yes, it's follow to that.
Yeah.
And usually we used to have adoration on Fridays.
Yeah.
And we missed that part. A lot of folks, we still gather for the holy hour from 2:30 all the way to we finish the divine mercy.
So I want to.
But it will be nice to have a deacon or somebody that we can do adoration from the afternoon to 3 o'clock.
So you're saying we used to have adoration on Fridays before the Mass moved over to Queen of Angels, and it would be nice to have a priest or someone. So I will tell you this, I have the authority as pastor to commission someone to do simple exposition and simple reposition, and I am happy to train properly trained people who are what is it? You're accountable to me, so don't think that you can just get it and be like, I'll do whatever I want. No, you won't, but to get people who are willing to do it. But I also would like to make a distinction, because sometimes we blur this line. Adoration is not the same as exposition. So exposition where the Eucharist is presented in a luna, inside a monstrance with at least 4 candles and 2 people present, exposition always involves adoration. But adoration is simply adoring the Blessed Sacrament, whether or not it is exposed in the monstrance or inside the tabernacle. And one of the ways that I think that we do ourselves a disservice is by focusing so much on exposition that we forget Jesus is still present and we can come adore him. And in no way do I want to diminish what you're saying, by the way, or I hope nobody feels like, oh, he's judging us or telling us you don't need exposition. Not at all. I'd be very happy to empower exposition. But I also want you to recognize and maybe look for the opportunity to come to church in adoration, even if exposition is not scheduled. Our churches, and I can tell you this wasn't the case in Seattle, we couldn't leave our churches open all the time. And when I was in Tacoma, it was the same way. Drugs, homelessness, vandalism, theft, all sorts of things that made it just really sad. And often had to be very secure in locking things up. I won't say we don't have all those problems here in smaller doses, but we are blessed to be able to have our churches, by and large, open most of the day, most days of the week. And I would very much like to encourage you not only to come yourselves. I mean, private devotion is a good and holy thing, and we all need it. But if every single one of us brought a friend to prayer, say, hey, let's go out for coffee, and by the way, do you mind if we stop at the church for 5 minutes and pray briefly? Let's pray a decade of the Rosary, or a decade of the Divine Mercy Chaplet, if you want to move really quick, or a Hail Mary or something. To bring that up, because first of all, again, the whole point of adoration isn't necessarily the exposition, it's the encounter with Christ. And the more we put ourselves in Christ's presence, the more likely we are to, have an encounter. But also, not only are we encountering Christ, but we're also building in our own hearts and the hearts of those who are with that thirst for exposition so that we can actually achieve those things as well. So again, I want you to leave with 2 messages on that front. One is, I am genuinely very happy to find people that I can trust, that I can find to be reliable, that I can find to be accountable, to empower you to be ones who perhaps are doing exposition and reposition. It would be a simple version. You don't bless people. You don't get to wear all the things priests wear. No pretending to be priests, thank you very much. But it can be done, and the church allows and even encourages pastors to do that. But the other part is to really be encouraged to take time to come to church and to pray. I am blessed, and I recognize that this is a special privilege of priests that the Archbishop allows for, the church permits. I have a chapel in my house. I have a tabernacle and altar at my rectory. In fact, all of us priests have received permission to do this. And so I try every morning to be there for a holy hour, and I actually do have a little monstrance that I could pull out, but I won't deny, at 5 o'clock in the morning, I need my cup of coffee, and no one, even Jesus, wants to hear me sing anything, much less a Latin hymn that is written a little bit in a high register. And so I do my adoration just in front of the tabernacle. And again, I think exposition has a special and beautiful place, but I hope that we don't minimize the opportunity to come to adoration. So both and, right? I guess that's the point I'm trying to make is I very much want to empower and make possible the exposition, but I also want to make sure we take advantage of this wonderful opportunity of our churches being open. And I really want to encourage you guys. you as the lay faithful, it is you who are empowered especially to go in the world. Have you guys seen Iron Man? Oh gosh, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting who I'm talking to. Forgive me. Raise your hand if you've heard of Iron Man. Okay, thank God. Highway Silver Away, Tonto? No? Lone Ranger, you guys have heard of the Lone Ranger, right? Okay. I'm Tonto, all right? That's my role. The priest serves as the one who is sort of the butler, if you will. And don't get me wrong, there's some wonderful privileges and powers that we priests have. I don't want to diminish my role. But the real ones who are going out into the world, who are proclaiming the gospel, are not the priests. My job is to be the guy at home who's providing you the meal every Sunday, who's giving you the sustenance, who's providing you the sacraments, who's offering you the strength that you need to go into the world and proclaim the gospel. And I don't mean to make it be like, get to work, you guys are being lazy. That's not my point at all. But I want you to know that you have a real power and authority. And part of that is, coming into the church and praying, and part of that is bringing people in as well. And again, I don't mean to make this a finger-wagging thing, because I can point at myself with all sorts of things that I ought to be or could be doing. But imagine a world where we are bringing so many people to church, even a little bit at a time, where there is that thirst for the Eucharist, and suddenly we find ourselves not only with a desire for exposition and adoration and people to man it, but, vocations that are springing forth from that. People who are rising up in response to the call of God. I mean, we have the space right now. Wouldn't it be lovely to have those priestly vocations, those religious vocations and whatnot? So, anyway, sorry, that turned into a bit of a homily, but there it is. Yes, way in the back. Yeah, having the homily bilingually. I will admit to you, I don't know how to square that particular circle because not all of our deacons and not all of our priests. The hardest part is for some of us. Some of us are comfortable switching languages fairly easily, and others not so much at all or are not capable at all. And I know here at St. Joseph's, and I'm honestly the responsibility lies on my shoulders. I have not solved the question I made a change when I first got here because we were repeating. I think it was the second reading we were doing in English and in Spanish, which is liturgically inappropriate, and so I stopped that. But then we didn't replace it with anything. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure how to square that circle. I won't pretend otherwise. My thought has been, but I have not moved on it, so I need to, has been to have one of the readings just be like perpetually in a different languages, English or Spanish. The hard part is bilingual often makes nobody happy. And on one hand, I'm not here to make you happy. I don't know if you have caught on to that yet, but here we are. But on the flip side, I want to do something that is pleasing and helpful to the community. And we do have a significant Spanish-speaking community. And I guess what I would say to this is putting all of the weight on the homily puts a lot of burden on the priest or the deacon that may not be sustainable, in all honesty. But finding a way to have Spanish present in... I would propose, and I want to be careful, I'm proposing, I'm not asserting, I'm not deciding. This is not a decision. Don't go telling all your friends, Father Maurer has decided something here. But I would propose that something that could be very helpful, particularly here at St. Joseph, where we have, something we don't have it at Queen of Angels, but here at St. Joseph we have a significant Spanish-speaking community, to incorporate Spanish into every Mass, in addition to having our third Sunday Mass be in Spanish. But that would be kind of the way I would go. And then bilingual homilies as the priest or the deacon are able, just because it's not always going to be possible.
Continuation to what you're saying, Father, I think once a month is fine, because the Spanish community is not responding as we thought they were.
Yeah.
So once a month is fine. I think it's very fair for American people that attend our Spanish. We're very grateful to Father. And by the way, if you decided to do your homily like that, we can even type it out in English for the English speakers so they can understand when they come to our Spanish.
No, and thank you for saying so. I mean, so just to recap, especially for the recording, that you're saying that maybe the single Spanish Mass a month is sufficient, and that perhaps the demand wasn't as high as we might thought of, and that making the very generous offer of typing up the priest's homily in Spanish. There is one problem with that, by the way, and it's not your problem, it's our problem. Because I talked to Father Gali and Father Ed, because there was different demand, not demand in the sense that we want, but the suggestion or request. Father, could we have a copy of your typed homily? None of us preach from notes. And part of it is stylistic, so part of it is just, we have sort of the practice. I will tell you for my own self, I have admired for a long time priests who preach from notes. I have the problem of, and I'm not saying that I am perfect, but the problem of perfectionism, and if I've typed something out, then I have to read it as it's written, and then my delivery becomes very wooden. So the problem that we would present to that offer would be, you'd have to record our homilies and then translate it to Spanish, and it wouldn't necessarily be the homily we gave at the other couple of masses. But I think bilingual homilies, I think, could be done. I don't know that I'm ready to commit to that again, because the burden then lands squarely on the shoulders of the preacher. I'm open to some kind of bilingual, celebration on a regular basis, or just or not. I see your expression there too. Yeah.
You don't have to say it and bilingual. What I'm saying is just to make the people that actually comes, the American people that comes into the Spanish Mass, being able to understand.
And you're very kind to emphasize the need of the English speakers as well. I will say this though, and to all of you English speakers particularly, I want you to imagine this scenario, because it's a scenario that exists. You go to a country and you're living now there for the rest of your life, and you don't speak the language. And as a gift, and it is a gift, because although the United States of America doesn't have a national language, English is effectively, and I'm not saying legally, but effectively the national language. As a gift, some parishes do a one Mass in Spanish all the time, and some parishes, such as ours, do Spanish only once a month. And I want you to consider what a great gift it is just to be able to have in your own language just once a month. And also what a great burden it is the rest of the month to show up and have it in English. And for those of us who are not native Spanish speakers, which includes me, it's probably good for us to experience that feeling of, I'm comrades, by one hand, by baptism, by faith. On the other hand, that's right. There are other people who speak other languages, and this is how they feel all the time. I will tell you a bit of an anecdote, and I recognize we're a little over time, so I'm going to wrap that up quickly too, but I'll stick around afterwards. I was in Mexico for Spanish-speaking immersion in Michoacan, for those of you who know the different areas, and it was my second summer in Mexico. And the second time around, some things were going on at home and back in the States, and I was desperately homesick. So I went and saw every single English movie, every rom-com, every kids movie, Spider-Man, a couple other things, because they were all in English with Spanish subtitles. But that wasn't really quite enough. That was 1 hour a week, so that's all I could afford. But one day I was like, I'm going to go to McDonald's. There were no McDonald's in Michoacan. So there was a Subway, and all right, I'm going to go to Subway. It'll be my American meal. It's going to be great. And I walked into Subway, and then I realized my mistake, having walked into Subway. Every vegetable has a different word. Every ingredient has a different name. And I walked up, you've been to Subway with all of its ingredients. And I walked up, and there's some 15-year-old who's behind the counter. And God only knows what he saw. As this 20-year-old man walks in, looks at the ingredients, and begins slowly to, eyes well up. And he sees me and says, in, kind of semi-broken English, I speak English if you speak slowly. And I swear, it took all my energy to not run around that counter and give that kid a hug. Just to have that little taste of home and not be denied it, because I couldn't articulate the words to say lettuce or onions or olives or whatever it is. And we are blessed. We are so blessed to be in our home country, in our home language. And by and large, quite honestly, be able to walk anywhere comfortably knowing that we will be understood and that we will understand what is said to us. And I don't say this to make us feel bad. I think there's enough of that in politics and whatnot. But for us to also perhaps look for those times when, if the roles were reversed, how gracious would we be? What would it be like if there was only one English Mass, or the priest had a heavy accent or whatever it was? So anyway, that isn't meant to be a rebuke of your offer or whatnot, but I think it's an important piece. I see other hands going up, but it is 8:15, so I want to answer questions afterwards, but I want to also close with prayer so that people who have to go. Thank you all very much for being here and for offering your questions. I'm going to stick around for at least another 15 minutes. And now you could ask questions once I finish the closing prayer without being recorded, if that's so your desire. But why don't we close with prayer before we go? In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for the gift of our faith, for the gift of our fellowship, for the gift of our communities. Bless us that we may be more and more united in the name of your Son, that in all of our celebrations we may come to love each other more and more as brothers and sisters, and give us the fervor and grace to go into the world to share the gifts we have received, so that not only our churches may grow, but faith in you and faith in your love may be received by all. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. The Lord be with you. Surprise. Now may God bless you, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Thank you all very much. Have a wonderful evening.